In the deep heart of Georgia, 1887, the walls of the Beckett estate whispered of secrets and servitude. A woman named Celeste scrubbed those floors until her hands cracked, paying for a debt that was never hers. And then he arrived, a widower, haunted by loss, a man who saw beyond color, beyond class, and saw a woman who'd forgotten what freedom felt like. They said it was madness, a scandal waiting to happen. But love, once it begins, doesn't ask permission, and on that storm-soaked night, he whispered the words that would change both their lives forever. "You're leaving this place with me." The storm had passed, but the air still carried its memory. The walls of the Beckett estate held every whisper, every footstep, and every secret that never belonged to her. I had been up since dawn, my hands raw from the lye water, my knees aching against marble that never stayed clean. The floor gleamed, but no shine in this house ever felt bright enough for the men who owned it. Mr. Grayson, the steward of the Beckett estate, a man who ruled the servants with his tongue instead of a whip, always walked as if he wanted the walls to know his name. The sharp click of his heels felt like a warning, and I'd learned not to flinch, only to move faster. He liked that, the way my panicked scurrying reminded me of my place. But that morning, something changed. Another set of footsteps joined his, heavier, steadier, unfamiliar. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. When I finally looked up, I saw him, Samuel Whitaker. The Englishman, they said, came to buy land in trouble. His clothes were simple but well kept, signaling a man who carried order with him, even in ruin. There was grief in his face. I could feel it, but when his eyes met mine, it wasn't pity I saw. It was something that reached through the air like warmth from a dying fire. Grayson's voice cut through the moment, sharp, thin, and cruel. He was saying something about me knowing my place, but the words barely reached my ears. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't listening to him. I was listening to my own heartbeat. When the two men walked away, I stared at the faint imprint of his boots on the floor I'd just cleaned. It was foolish, I knew, but the air where he'd been still felt different, lighter. That evening, I worked until the candles burned low. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that lets your thoughts become too loud, and then I heard his voice, low, steady, and near the doorway. There was no command, no anger, only a deep rumble of truth. No one deserves to live like this. I wanted to look up, to ask what kind of man dared say such a thing in this house, but the words caught behind my lips. Outside, the storm gathered again. I could smell it in the air. And somewhere inside me, something small and long, asleep, began to stir, a feeling that terrified me more than the storms ever had. Hope. The next morning came, dressed in gray light. The storm had quieted, but its echo still hung above the marsh like a warning no one wanted to name. I woke before the others, as always. Though sleep had been a stranger to me all night, his voice kept replaying in my mind, soft, certain, like the sound of a door unlocking somewhere deep inside me, whispering. No one deserves to live like this. I'd repeated it until it felt like a prayer I had no right to recite. By mid-morning, the house had come alive with orders, clinking china, and Mr. Beckett's sharp laughter in the parlor. He'd returned from town smelling of whiskey and pride. When Mr. Whitaker arrived, the air shifted, like the world remembering its manners. From my corner near the hearth, I saw them greet each other. Beckett all smiles and false warmth, the kind that hides teeth. Whitaker stood easy, hat in hand, but his eyes moved across the room until they found me. Just a flicker, yet it was enough to still my hands. He shouldn't have looked that way. Men like him didn't. But he did. And something in that look made my breath falter, as if the air itself had chosen sides. Beckett noticed. He always noticed what he could twist. His voice turned honey sweet. He spoke of debts and property, of keeping things in line. Each word felt like a chain being polished. Then Mr. Whitaker said my name. Quietly, but the whole room heard it. I'd never heard my name sound so gentle, not like a command, but a soft, unfamiliar memory. He asked how long my service was owed. Beckett laughed, the kind of laugh that bruises. Said a woman like me could work 10 lifetimes and never earn her keep. Said I was lucky to belong anywhere at all. I kept my eyes on the floor, though my heart begged me to run. But Mr. Whitaker didn't laugh. He simply set his hat down and said he'd like to settle that account. For a heartbeat, the room forgot to breathe. Beckett's face reddened the way it does when pride meets its reflection. He firmly said no amount of English money could buy what was his by law, but Whitaker didn't raise his voice. He just looked at him, the way calm men do when they've already decided what comes next. "I'm not asking what's yours," he stated, his voice a quiet finality. "I'm asking what's right." The silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. I dared to glance up, and his eyes met mine. In them I saw not pity, not Savior's fire, but recognition, like he'd been searching for someone he couldn't name until that moment. Something inside me ached to look away, but I couldn't. Beckett muttered something about stubborn fools and left for his study, slamming the door hard enough to shake the glass. The others scattered like leaves. Whitaker stood there for a long moment, his gaze tracing the empty doorway, then returning to me. He didn't move closer, only said, low enough for the walls to keep his secret, "You deserve better than this house." I should have thanked him or pretended not to hear. But the truth pressed too hard against my chest. For the first time, I wanted to be seen, truly seen, and not vanish because of it. When he turned to leave, the sunlight caught the edge of his sleeve and flashed across his hand. That single glint of gold felt like a promise, and I knew, as sure as I knew the shape of my own fear, that the world was already counting the price. For 2 days the house held its breath. Mr. Beckett spoke little, but the quiet was the kind that comes before lightning. I felt it in the air, thick as lye water on my hands. He called for me on the 3rd morning. The parlor was already warm, shutters drawn, brandy glowing like fire in his glass. Mr. Whitaker stood nearby, hat off, jaw tight, the storm still hiding behind his eyes. Beckett smiled the way snakes do when they have already bitten. He said I'd grown proud, that a girl who forgot her station needed reminding. His words came smooth, but each one landed like a blow. Then he angrily told me to kneel, not in prayer, in punishment, and when I hesitated, his hand moved quick as thunder. The strike landed, a searing sting across my mouth. Then Mr. Whitaker's arm shot out, catching Beckett's wrist mid-swing, fingers locking like iron. The sound of their breath filled the room. I'd never seen a man stare another down with that kind of calm fury. Beckett's face flushed red, and for a heartbeat, I thought one of them would draw blood. Whitaker's voice came low, steady, the kind that made you listen. He said there were debts no decent man should collect. He said mercy had its own price, and he was willing to pay it. Beckett tore free, shouting about property and law, about how men like Whitaker would never understand this land. Then he turned his rage on me, his words slicing cleaner than any whip. I didn't cry. I wouldn't give him that. But my hands trembled until Whitaker's voice cut through again, soft but certain. Enough. The room fell still. Even the clock seemed to forget its ticking. Beckett laughed, a dry, bitter sound. He told Whitaker that pity could be dangerous, that men who meddled in other men's business often left Georgia with regrets, or worse. Whitaker didn't answer. He just looked at me, and in that look I saw everything he couldn't say aloud: apology, promise, warning. When Beckett left, the silence he left behind was heavy as stone. Whitaker stepped closer, stopping just short of the light that reached my feet. His voice had softened again. I meant what I said. I'll find a way. I wanted to believe him, but hope in this house was a fragile thing. Still, when he reached out, not to touch, only to offer his handkerchief for the blood on my lip, my breath caught. The fabric smelled faintly of rain and cedar, and for a moment I forgot the walls, the rules, the danger. He left soon after, boots echoing down the hall like a heartbeat fading into distance. That afternoon, I stood by the window and watched the storm gather again. I thought of his eyes, the way they had met mine, as if the world wasn't watching. And I realized mercy in a place like this was never free. It always demanded something in return. Night came early that day, heavy with thunder. I'd just finished the last of the washing when I heard the shouts, Beckett's voice, slurred with drink, and another man's I didn't know. Then came my name, dragged through the air like a curse. I froze, the cloth slipping from my hand into the water. They were talking about me, saying Whitaker had overstepped, that a man like him needed a lesson, that the girl would serve as the warning. My knees weakened. Before I could think, I was running, not fast, just quiet, down the back corridor where the rain slid through cracks in the roof. Every sound felt too loud. The floorboards creaked like thunder, and my heart pounded to match it. Then, through the kitchen door, I saw him. Whitaker, soaked to the bone, standing in the rain, his presence a solid, unmoving defiance. When his eyes found mine, I didn't need words. He just said, low, urgent, "We have to go." I didn't ask where. There wasn't time for questions, only movement, breathless and wild through the downpour that blurred the night into silver and shadow. Behind us, the shouts grew louder. Beckett's rage cut through the storm like a whip. I could hear the dogs, the boots, the chaos spilling into the yard. Whitaker led the way, his hand warm around mine despite the rain. Each step sank into mud, but we didn't stop. The lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, I saw his face, jaw set, eyes fierce. Not the calm man from before, but something raw. When we reached the stables, he swung the gate open, freeing the horse with a motion so sure it felt practiced. He lifted me up first, then climbed behind. The moment his arm came around me, the world narrowed to the sound of hooves and thunder. We rode hard across the fields, wind biting, rain stinging like truth. The marsh opened before us, endless and black, and every flash of lightning painted the world in pieces, the manor shrinking behind us, the road ahead glistening with promise and peril. I wanted to look back, but he whispered, "Don't." So I didn't. I just held on tighter, the heat of his chest at my back a fragile reminder that we were still alive. When the horse stumbled near the edge of the woods, he pulled us to a stop beneath the old oak. The sound of the rain changed, softer now, muffled by leaves. He slid down, pulling me gently after him. His hand lingered a second longer than it should have, maybe to steady me, maybe because neither of us wanted to let go. The silence between us cracked under our breathing. Somewhere in that moment, half terror, half awe, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Beckett, not of what came next. Because if freedom had a sound, it was this: rain on the leaves, his heartbeat near mine, and the promise of a dawn we hadn't yet seen. He looked at me then, really looked, and in his eyes I saw the promise made true. "You're leaving this place with me." By dawn the storm had wandered north, leaving the earth soaked and shining. We'd found a small chapel half buried in the woods, its roof sagging, but still standing against the years. He half carried me inside, and for the first time in my life, The silence around me felt like mercy, not punishment. Mr. Whitaker's sleeve was dark with blood where the branch had caught him. He waved it off. "A scratch," he said, but the way he swayed told another story. I tore a strip from my skirt and pressed it to his arm. The fabric turned red in seconds, but his eyes never left mine. "You shouldn't have come back for me," I whispered. He smiled, faint and crooked. "I told you, Celeste. I wasn't leaving without you." Outside, the wind carried the smell of wet earth and magnolia. For a moment I let myself imagine that scent belonged to a home I hadn't yet seen. We stayed hidden there 2 days. He sent word through a peddler to an old friend in Savannah, a doctor, and it was that man who found us, not Beckett's riders. The doctor stitched the wound and said we were lucky. I already knew that. When we finally rode south, the marsh opened like a new world. The road shimmered, and the sky had forgotten how to thunder. He spoke little, but sometimes I caught him looking my way, that same look from the manor hall, softened now by something I dared to name. Weeks later, news reached us. Beckett's debts had caught up with him. His land seized, his house shuttered, his steward, Mr. Grayson, gone to work for whoever would have him. The world has its own way of balancing the scales, even when the law refuses to. We settled near the coast in a cabin the doctor helped him buy. Simple wood walls, white curtains that danced in the breeze. I planted magnolia by the window, and when it bloomed, he said the scent reminded him of that storm-broken night. Sometimes, when the evenings turn gold, I see him sitting by the door, hands rough from honest work, eyes steady and kind. He still calls me his reason for staying. I tell him I was never his to save, only to find. And though the world may never understand what it cost, I know this much. Freedom isn't the absence of chains. It's the moment someone looks at you and finally sees who you were before the world told you otherwise. He found me in that moment. And I found myself. If this love story touched your heart, show some love back, like the video and subscribe for more. Tell me in the comments, should their love story continue or end with mystery?